All right, we shall start. Hello, everybody. Hello, Discord people. Hello, YouTube people, if we're doing it for YouTube. Today, we're going to be doing a cool thing. As you know, we're doing a bunch of frame studies during the week on our Discord server, and a few people asked, how do you study film shots? What to look for, what questions to ask, all that, and I'll go over it, right? Because when you do different things in the industry, so for example, you're an environment artist, color key artist, I don't know, keyframe artist, and all that stuff, you can actually look for different things to learn from I guess keyframes or movie still shots, right? And I'll probably start with the best 2D animated movie of all time, Prince of Egypt. Right, and number one thing that we should think about when we look at any image's composition, right? I would make a list, and the list would be probably first composition, right? You look at your rule of thirds, see where things are, so you can, because when we are observing, we need to observe with consciously observing things, not just copying. Because a lot of people, what they do is they're like, okay, this is a shot, and then they just copy it. And honestly, when you're doing film studies and you're just copying an image, I would say don't do that, because there's more productive ways of spending your time. All right, because the thing is, when you're just copying, yes, you may be subconsciously downloading the visual into your brain, and then you can reproduce it. But honestly, it's like that exercise. When in school we had to like copy one image, and we had squares, and then we would like copy them square by square. It could be beneficial, but it's not very useful, I say, right? So when we start with any image, first of all, we need to understand what is in the context, right? What's the purpose of this shot, right? What's the context of this shot? What was before and what was after? Because it's really important to understand, as a storyboard artist, or as a color key artist, or as an environment artist, or as a keyframe artist, or as an artist in general, what purpose does this shot serve and why, right? Like, for example, let's look at this shot when what's his name? Moses is talking to the main guy, right? What do we see here, right? Well, first of all, this guy is taller than this guy. That means he is superior, right? Secondly, we have the whole Egypt in the background. This guy is talking about Egypt, right? And then he not only is taller than this guy, but he has like a freaking statue of himself silhouetting him, kind of doubling down on his power in this shot, right? Because you have to understand, every shot, especially in animation, is very expensive and is there for a reason. Because if they didn't make to the final cut, then they probably went through 3 or 5 of iterations of the same shot, and they came up with the best shot that would, get the point across, get the main story or the dialogue across, right? So you have to always, before you even start painting, you have to understand what's the context of this shot. What is the meaning of this shot? What did the director or the storyboard artist or the layout team try to tell me through this staging and through this composition, right? And then when we kind of understand, or we'll try to understand what the moment means by, remembering what was before, what's after. And I really recommend watching the full sequence, have maybe like a movie in the background, and just make a screenshot, and then remember what happened before and after. And then you start dissecting composition wise, right? So there's 2 things I like to do. I don't usually do those grids ever, because I train my mind to kind of see them without. But we have the rule of thirds. It doesn't really work that well, probably because another thing is, when we're thinking about animation is sequences in motion, right? So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they started walking towards each other. So they kind of were in approximate rule of thirds when they were walking to each other, right? Right. Then we're gonna pop dynamic symmetry on, see how that looks, right? Looks pretty well, right? And I always try to see you know, intersecting lines, leading lines that keep us in the focal point. You know what, this looks a little bit scary, so I'll redraw it so it's not as confusing. Dynamic symmetry, I already talked in one of those in one of my lectures. It's just a grid that has interesting dynamic leading lines, and almost in any image you'll see some kind of coloration, right? So for example, like we see that, you know, what's his name? The emperor. I forgot what the name of this guy is, but the king dude. You can see that he follows this line pretty well, right? And we see Moses over here following this line pretty well, right? Then we have some towers, like we have over here, also having a leading line over here. Let's see if there's anything else, right? Those trees kind of are leading lines, but again, it's kind of like an invisible thing that, like for example, if we put it like here, right? It's not, let's say, particularly a line that you're looking for, right? But you're looking for rhythm. So for example, I see this tower over here has this line, right? You know, his eyebrow is kind of having the same, you know, motion, right? This thing is kind of at an angle, right? And there's a tree over here. So what we're looking for, what we're looking for is little rhythms in an image, right? And that's why I like dynamic symmetry so much, because, well, rule of thirds doesn't really work here that well, right? And if it doesn't work that well, then dynamic symmetry is here to the rescue. So yeah, number one, the intent of the scene, right? As Borja said, what's the story / context, right? And if you have the story and you have the context figured out, then you ask, all right, so I know what the intent is, and now you're learning, oh, this is how the composition, right? Composition is playing within the story. You know, some shots will not tell a story at all through composition, but if we are, you know, studying really good cinematographers, directors, or animation, it should have that. It should 100% have that, right? Because they really pay attention to the story. All right, let's say we figure out what the composition is, right? It's pretty balanced. Another thing that you can do, if you want, right? If you want to, improve your analytical skills even more, what you can do is you can think of shapes, right? Shape balance. First, you can just say, okay, there's a large shape over here, right? There's another large shape over here. So, and then there's another smaller shape, and then this is balanced out, right? There's another shape over here, and overall, right, there's a shape here, there's a shape over here. Remember, in our compositional lecture a long time ago, we can imagine a scale, right? And we can see, is this composition balanced or not? And you know what? Sometimes you'll find unbalanced compositions, especially if they're in motion. If it's a still shot that holds for a while, that they have to do like a matte painting for, it should be pretty balanced if the camera isn't moving like 360 degrees. It's not always possible for animators, cinematographers to keep the shot absolutely balanced at all times, at every camera angle, right? So sometimes you'll see if the camera is moving from one position to another, let's say from point A to like point B, let's say it's going to be a pan, it's not always going to be perfect, right? But then when the camera is still, and then maybe has just a little, you know, dolly in or a pan in or pan out, it should be pretty balanced, right? So composition, shapes, is everything balanced? Cool. You know, you check the rule of thirds, you check the dynamic symmetry. All right, cool. What's next? Well, the next thing that I really would love you guys to study is actually silhouettes, right? So I would, if you guys want to do a full-on study of a shot, not just copy it, but really understand every stage of the shot, I would do shape design study, also silhouettes, right? Because you can learn a lot from silhouette design of professional artists, right? You just fill it in and you see how it looks, right? All right, okay, cool, I see it. Then you look at, secondary shapes. And just so you understand, you can also do it in, you can do two studies at the same time. Not only values, not only silhouettes, but values also. And I will get to our fourth point, which is lighting. Before we even touch color or anything else, right? And then let's have something over here. This one is just a big shape overall, like this. And then we're gonna have, remember we did this exercise a long time ago in our color and light week? Right, and go something like this. Ideally, you can pick two to three values. I'll do black, gray, black, gray, and lighter gray, something like this, right? And if we double check it, right, we could have went lighter, but that's the thing that we chose. It's going to be something like this, right? And of course, it's not perfect. There's some lighting. If we want, we can do that, but not yet, right? So we checked out the composition, right? We understand. We checked out shapes. Now we checked out silhouettes and the main value structure or the main value grouping. We're not even talking about lighting right now, right? Let's update our list of things, right? So first, figure out what the story is, figure out composition, then we think about shapes and balance, which is part of the composition. Shapes and balance, then silhouettes, and value. And then fifth is lighting, right? So now we need to think about lighting direction. We have our values, right? They're presented pretty well, right? And let's make those. They're not that dark or something like this, right? And then we're like, okay, now you think about lighting, and you think about, some people call it light map or light shapes or shadow shapes. I just call it where the lighting direction is coming from, right? And then just by looking at the thing over here, we can see that it's coming from the right, right? Luis, kran kapit. Sorry, I just have water dripping slowly, and it's almost like Chinese torture from the faucet. All right. Let's see where the lighting is coming from the right, and what you can do is, on top of your shapes that you already, drew out, you can just lasso tool it really quick. And of course, I'm doing it on top of the image. I'm cheating a little bit. You would be doing it by eye to train it, right? And you can just go like this, right? And if I'm not mistaken, then on top of it, we had the face. Like this. It also was lit something like this, and we can double check things, right? Well, now let's since we figure out what the shapes are, we can add a little bit more values, because sometimes it's impossible to do the lighting map perfect, right? All right, we know where the lighting is coming from. We know everything else, right? And now it's time to understand what colors do we have, right? Again, composition, just regular silhouettes, right? In terms of shapes, then you see where the lighting is coming from. This one is pretty simple. There's not much lighting happening in the shadows. As you can see, they're all basically diffused lighting lit. If you want, you can later on, right? You can later on even dissect the, the simple shapes into, so like the guy's skin color is going to be something like this probably, right? But I usually don't like going too much into detail, right? If you want to go full on study mode and make it all pretty, you can. But as you can see, the simple statement is still kind of the same. Those guys are dark against light, right? As you can see. So in my head, this looks like this. If you want to show more variation and you want to show that there's a little bit darker darks and lighter lights within the silhouette, that is fine, right? But when I think about when I think about composition in a keyframe, I usually go like this, right? I usually go like, is this silhouette just dark? Yes, it is dark. Okay, so that's how I see it in my mind, right? Is this, what about this? This is also dark against light, dark against light, dark against light, right? This one is a little bit more complex because it has shadow shapes in it, right? But I would study it the same way as I did this one. But you know what? Because this one is a little bit simple in terms of shape design and lighting, let's do a super quick study for this guy, right? So that's why when you think about silhouettes, right? So this guy would be a silhouette probably, right? You can either make him like this, but I would debate that this guy is not really a silhouette. This is more of a collection of negative shapes. And we know that the lighting is coming from the right because of the shadows over here, right? So with this guy, when I will be doing like shape and then into lighting studies, I would have not even made him a silhouette or anything like that. I would have just lasso tooled negative shapes in terms of where the lighting is not what's it called, where the light doesn't reach. Here you go. Let's see how that looks, right? Because technically, when you're thinking about lighting in general in a keyframe, it is a collection of dark and light things, right? Where the light does reach or doesn't reach, and it's really beneficial to think about your keyframes or your own art as collection of negative shapes, silhouettes, dark and light patches of light that get interpreted as something, right? Because a lot of people, they think, hey, I am drawing a hand, or I am drawing a human. I'm like, no, you're drawing collections of shapes and things on a 2D surface that then get interpreted as something, right? So, and honestly, if I would have been studying keyframes these days, remember here we did everything in 3 values. I would, a lot of my students, what I tell them to do is I say, study the composition in terms of negative shapes and silhouettes and the lighting direction, just with 2 values, with black and white. Because if you can simplify things into just black and white shapes, well, you know what? I'm gonna just do it like this, and then I'm gonna erase. I'm gonna erase things from there. Because if you can dissect things into black and white shapes and the main light source, you'll understand much more than regular people. Because regular people, they think of this composition as super complex, and by dissecting this into just 2, honestly, this would be actually a 1 value too over here, right? And then it would look something like this, right? So this is the negative shape kind of or the lighting patterns in this composition, right? So this is us studying silhouettes, lighting, everything, to be honest. And then if you want to, you can then, well, you can go ahead and then, you know, add lighting into it if you want to, and then add extra extra values, right? And then it's going to be, you know, super simple to do. I think we had Moses in the foreground here. As you can see, this is super simple later on to you know, to stylize and to look better. But again, it's really important that you can do shape, silhouette, and lighting study just with 2 values, 2 tones, right? Because if you can do that, then you can add second, third, and fourth if you want to, till eternity, right? All right. So now let's go over things again, so it pops into your brain forever, right? We think, what's the context? What's the context of this image, right? And this image needs to show that, you know, Jewish people are building the Egyptian empire, right? They're enslaved, and this guy feels bad about it, right? Moses feels bad about it. So we have a towering Egyptian statue, kind of overlooking on everything. We have good leading lines that create good rhythms and depth. We have low-hanging camera, right? That's another thing. Think about why the camera is the way it is. Again, in the context, what's the story? Rewatch, you know, storyboarding 101 of the lecture if you want in the art camp. And then when we understand the composition, we understand why it looks good composition-wise and shape-wise, right? Again, this is pretty balanced. This thing, those guys go here. This is a little bit darker. It's a pretty well-balanced composition. Shapes, silhouettes are readable, right? Values, well, we understand the values. We have lots of atmosphere going into the background. And again, super clear read. Like, look at this, guys, right? Like, this is a little bit too complex, and that's why I wanted to keep it simple. To have a great painting, you need to have a great, you know, shape structure, value structure, and it has to be simple and readable. And number one thing that you can see from animation specifically, I'm not going to say it's going to be like this in every screenshot that you make from a movie, but majority of things, especially like establishing shots, are very important shots. They're going to be super clear, right? The only reason why it's not clear here is because we did everything with one value, but if we just add another value over here, right, we'll see Moses right away. It's super clear, right? Yeah. So the next thing is color. See how many things we had to go through just to understand the shot? And a lot of you guys, you don't think about studying frame like this. You just have it to the left of your screen, and then on the right, you just try to copy it, right? But that's not how it works. Or hopefully now you understand better how to do it. So now when we think about color, right? I'm not sure if I'm gonna color a whole keyframe today. Maybe, we'll see. But when we think about color, right, we have to keep one thing in mind, right? We already went through value, and if you figure out value and everything else, you already have most of your image solved, honestly, right? So for example, if I gonna just, you know, just color pick this, and, you know, really quickly do this. Let me have this as a little thumbnail over here, right? So if we have the main value structure down, or the main shapes, honestly, and you have them on a separate layer, right? It's not a big deal to go in and then paint things in really quickly. Like we're gonna have some bounce light over here. I gotta do it super crudely because we don't have a lot of time. And I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna color pick a little bit. Ding ding ding, ding ding ding. Then we had this guy over here. He had white robes with, I think it was like a red thing, and he had a wig. He had a wig, something like this. All right, then towards the top, it was getting pretty light like this, and then in the shadows, there's a lot more grays, especially in here, right? And then if we want to, we can just have some atmospheric perspective in there. And again, it's not perfect, but from far away, it looks pretty darn close, right? Right, so if we would put it over here, from far away, of course, this is a horrible study. It's not really super amazing, but it's pretty darn close. Why? Well, because we solved the majority of things. Now we just have to color pick stuff. Okay, also not color pick stuff. I color pick stuff because I have to do it really quickly. But we have to only analyze one thing. What is the context? The context is yellow, brownish, orangish desert, right? So everything's going to be affected by that. What else we're going to have? We're going to have stone in there. Stone has some bounce light over here. All right, cool. Where the lines come from? From the right. As you can see, there's some rim lights on the right that I forgot to put in here, right? And everything's pretty simple from there, right? And you know what? Let me copy this so I have it in the folder. So then I can create a little checklist thing that you can all have, right? And honestly, that's the process for every frame that you can take. So with this one, right? First of all, we think about, okay, what's the simple statement? Well, the simple statement is this: it's a cool freaking statue, very ominous looking. That's it, right? And then you think, all right, what's the main value structure in here, right? And to check it, what you can do is you can make it black and white. Get the contrast all the way to the right, and then brightness all the way, like something like this. And then this way, you can kind of get an idea, just to check what are the main value structures. And then another thing is squinting. Squinting is really good. So when I squint over here, right, what do I see? Right. Well, I see a couple of things. So first of all, I see this as a pretty dark framing mechanism, right? And that's another thing. Look for frames. Frames are everywhere in cinema, right? So if you go here, the main shape of those guys are something like this, right? This is the simple statement. Everything else is just secondary, right? Yes, there's a little bit of those, but that has to be another kind of value, right? There's something here just for depth's sakes, right? Composition is pretty central, so it's pretty standard, right? Now what we're gonna have? Well, they're gonna be a little bit lighter. Again, see, we make just the negative shape map without colors, and now, all right, well, they're lit by light, right? And they're lit like they're top lit, actually, right? Slightly from the left. As we can see here, oh man, this has beautiful negative shape map or shadow map, I guess. And it's gonna be something like this. Of course, it's not gonna be perfect, guys, so bear with me, but I want you to understand the gist of it. And I think this was an acrylic painting, so technically, almost, I'm gonna say this: not everything in this painting actually makes sense lighting wise. There's a lot of line going on just to show the features of the statues and make it look good. So yeah, lying in real life, not good. Lying and painting, good. Talk, all right. Boris, please don't talk. Thanks, man. All right. And doink. All right. So this is kind of. Oh, whoops. Oh man, I filled in the wrong stuff. That's okay. And then this one is gonna be something like this, and then it's gonna have this, and same thing. Oh, okay. Never mind. I did everything correct. This just has to be, yeah. This has to be lighter. Something like this. Background. Background's pretty light. Something like this. This has to be a little bit lighter. Now let's see if we got it right. Kinda. Right. Now we can, get over here. Maybe do a little bit of this. Right. And I think it was a little bit, yeah, there's a lot of fog on the bottom half of it all. And then I'm a little bit lazy. I'm not gonna color it all of it. So I'm just gonna do, oops. I'll just take the color. It's like green and blue. Yeah, something like this. So it's like something like that. If I'm not mistaken, then they have this. There's a little bit of the light in here, and then yeah, things were a little bit more greenish, and we had some highlights on their faces here and here, and for the shadows, we have the shadow map. Let's just go ahead and just color pick this and just make it the same color. Something like this. Is it perfect? No, as you can see, there's some mistakes here and there. We have something like this. They're overall a little bit more blue. Yeah, something like this. Like that. But the main simple statement is there, right? Again, see, the process is super simple. Composition was the simple statement of the story. You think about the main negative shapes and the main silhouettes. Just with two values, you can add second, third, and fourth if you want to. And because you have negative shapes, technically all you have to do is just paint in color with a clipping mask. And to analyze color, every time, especially with more cinematic stuff, I'll show you a little bit later. You just think, all right, where's my main light source? And it's pretty simple in this one, right? There's two light source here that don't really affect the statues. There's some kind of like moonlight coming from over here. That's why there's shadows over here, right? And there's some kind of like just sky space in the back, and that's it, right? Another thing, if you want to do, extra studies, what you can do is, before you jump into color, you can make a little, you can make a little color swatch guide for yourself, and you just have lasso tool in the square mode, and you just color pick stuff, and you see what the color structure is, making it something like this, right? Then you have shadows over here, right? And then you understand, I'm like, I see, okay. And then also we have some faces over here, see, like this. Oops. And you're like, oh, I see. The main focal points is them dark against light, and then the kids are within the silhouette, right? they are light against dark in terms of value, right? And you're like, oh, okay, I see it in terms of color. And you think, okay, my main temperatures. Well, because it's dark and cold, oh, my temperature is going to be going towards, you know, blues, right? So everything's going to be affected by that. And then the reason why they used a little bit of purple, a little bit of orange is like, well, they needed a little bit of color variety in this shot, because if everything was too blue, well, then it would have been just a little bit boring, right? Right. All right. So now, since you all know the process, we'll just think about this one. You're like, all right, what is it? Well, it's a coronation, a big crowd. So we have silhouettes of the crowd in the foreground. If what we've done with two values, like we add negative shapes here, we would have white space here. So the silhouettes over here. Red, right? It's all about readability, guys, right? In all of those shots, all about silhouettes, all about strong values. You know, 1, 2, 3 values. If you don't remember when we talked about environment art, you can check out lecture environment 101, right? We have leading lines, pretty cool, that kind of show depth. You know, if you wanna have depth in your compositions, that's just have, you know, some things hanging from the roof going into the distance, right? Then we have the same thing with the crowd. That is the leading line. We have nice foreground. Silhouettes wise, I think you can see everything. Again, this one is really weird. I think I would have never thought that, you know, this white statue would look so brownish, weirdish, but it looks good. Right, and then in terms of color, right, can you see this, guys? Can you see this big blob of this, and then can you see this just white staircase? This is the simple statement of this composition, right? We have a bunch of stuff, but again, the lightest light is just this giant cube, and we'll look into it, right? That's what the values are doing. And in terms of color, you have to understand that this one is a little bit of an impossible, I would say, shot. Like, I have no idea where the light is coming from here. Like, I have no idea what lights up the staircase. It's like, I see some subsurface here, so it's probably like maybe a light over here, and then what light bounces over here, but maybe it's light bounce. I don't know. I know there's a moonlight coming, probably, well, it's coming straight down, I guess, right? So this one is a tricky shot, because I think this one was painted by Nathan Fowkes, and Nathan Fowkes is like very impressionistic with his stuff. So if it looks good, we should question how it looks. The reason why it looks still believable is because I think our minds just thinks that this thing is just a giant bounce light, and that's why the environment looks okay, right? So yeah, so this is the Prince of Egypt stuff, right? Super simple, super simple. Now let's talk about more cinematic stuff. So, for example, I have some examples of Star Wars Bad Batch things. Where's my text? There you are. Oh, okay. Right, let's hide it. So when we're thinking about more cinematic stuff, like Star Wars, for example, especially more, I would say Prince of Egypt is a drama, but Star Wars is more of a like classically, cinematically lit drama, and it's important to have studies, not only animation, let's say Monsters University or Prince of Egypt, but have a whole variety of things that you can learn from, because different genres or different cinematographers or directors, they would use different, you know, lighting or you know, visual language, right? And with Bad Batch, Star Wars, it's very classically lit in terms of, and I'll explain it in a bit. If you remember the classic 3-point lighting, right? Because it's 3D, right? The reason why Prince of Egypt was more silhouette driven than lighting driven on some characters, it's because it's really hard to do lighting on characters in 2D. So what Klaus did now, they couldn't do back in what it was 97, if I'm not mistaken. I think Prince of Egypt 98. Prince of Egypt came out somewhere there, right? But in 3D we can. So 3D is more flexible lighting-wise, and as you know, color key artists do it, and I use this lighting system all the time, right? And as in the lecture, as I said in the lecture for color and light, it's a regular 3-point setup. We have a key light, which can be also a rim light, right? We have fill light, or a bounce card that fills in the shadows. It either has a light source of its own, right, or it bounces the light from the key light, right? And then sometimes we usually have rim light, extra rim light for getting the guy out. But again, it's not set in stone. You can turn things on and off. So for example, over here there's one light source, the moon, right? Over here it's more classical, right? You have your main light source. Well, like for different characters it's a different thing. So but let's just look at this guy. You have him lit by, let's say this is the key light. Then you have a rim light to the right, right? Making him slightly like this, but there's no like rim light. So I guess they said if it still looks good, they didn't have the contour light, some people would say. All right, let's say over here, this one is interesting. They just used 2 rim lights to pop him out. Over here, same thing. 1 rim light, and then second rim light over here to pop them out. This one, same way. You know, it's really interesting. In Bad Batch, they don't to make it more dramatic. They don't use key lights at all. They light almost everything with just the rim lights, man. Yeah, this one also light with the rim light, and this one is also, you know, they just pop a freaking light bulb to the left, right? And that's why it's really interesting that if you like a show for its feeling, you can just go ahead and just yoink the lighting scenarios out of it for your own art, right? So for example, now we see the difference between, let's say, Prince of Egypt and Bad Batch, right? And this one feels more, that one felt more majestic. This one feels a little bit more greedy, more dark. Of course, sci-fi because of the colors. But to be honest, it's absolutely the same principle. First, we think about composition, right? This one is pretty boring, but it works, right? It's just a circle. And then if we would simplify this one is interesting value-wise, actually. But I love when people use simple shapes. When people use simple shapes to get their point across, right? Because this is not something too complex. This is just a freaking donut, just hanging there. And yeah, let's see. This one is a little bit tricky because it has, what do you call it, a checkerboard thingamajig, right? Because this one probably has to be a little bit lighter, something like this. Yeah, because this place is in the shadow, right? And this place is in the dark, but the whole shape has to read. And I think we succeeded in that. Maybe we can make it a little bit brighter, contrasty, brighter, something like this. And over there, there's going to be a little bit of, I think there's like cityscape stuff. Yeah, and also but you understand the gist of it. 1 second, guys, I have to check my email. Yeah, Borja messaged me. So yeah, so that's the Bad Batch, right? Dramatic lighting, as you can see, it's very low key lit, which just if we would have made, you know, I'm not gonna do a black and white thing, but as you can see, if we would have made a shadow map for it, it's almost something like this, right? Of course, we would have to cheat a little bit, right? And would have had to probably do this as a silhouette. But then what's the read, guys? Right? What's the read? Like if I do it too dark, it's light against darks. Yeah. What's this? This is dark against light, right? And that's how you should think about all of the keyframes. Right? Same thing here. Like what these guys are. Well, they're dark against light, right? Right. What about these guys? Well, they are. Well, this one is a little bit trickier because this one's majority of those guys they're dark against light, right? So they're like just dark shapes. But this guy is kind of like dark against light over here, right? So this is light. But then he is light against dark, right? And this is what it's called a checkerboard. See? We made a checkerboard shape. That's why it's called checkerboard value thingamajig. And you don't usually have it too much because majority of stuff you can dissect just by lights and darks, but sometimes you get those checkerboard value ranges that are a little bit tricky. But well, you know what, over here this is actually a perfect example. As you can see here, you have light, dark, right? So this guy has light behind him and this guy has dark behind him, right? But this guy also has light behind him, but he's a dark shape on top of it. So see, this is a perfect representation of a checkerboard value range. But yeah, this is how you make movie studies. Let's go through the list one more time so we understand everything. First, we think what the story is, right? Right. We do it by analyzing the frames in the context of the story and thinking about the whole movie and what's the role of that frame is. Then we do quick composition. Quick composition thing. Just dynamic symmetry, rule of thirds, all of that stuff. Then we dissect everything to shapes. Get our values going, see what the silhouettes are, see if the weight is right, and then we think where the lighting is coming from, what direction. What the context is, what the quality of light is, what color is the light. And then if we need to, we can make the small diagram in terms of what's the accent color of my frame, right? Is it going to be like bright orange, like as here, right? Or it's going to be, let's say, like a super saturated blue, as in this frame, right? Remember, guys, usually the focal points are the brightest things and the most saturated things in the frame, right? Because you have to understand, in movies are super different from illustrations. Illustrations, we have more than 5 seconds to look at. In movies, we have a shot, and that shot is on the screen for a split second, and the main focal point has to be, revealed within the first, nanosecond, so we can understand and process what's going on screen. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Now it's time for questions and answers. So if you have them, you can either write them somewhere, or you can write them in the chat, or you can just ask them by voice. So feel free to do that while I am answering. Hello. No questions? If you don't have any questions, that means I did my job well. But if you do, please, while I have the time, I wanna be helpful. That's what I'm thinking. All right. And I'll compose a better looking checklist for you guys so we can have it. Yeah. I know you guys probably thought that I would just do a demo of me painting with color, but as you can see, color. We can think about coloring a little bit later, especially. I'm composing a color and light course now, so we will cover that 100%. But I don't see a lot of people talk about things that I talk right now, and I think it will really level up your film studies if you pay attention to those things. As you can see, a bunch of people are writing something. We have 15 minutes because in 15 minutes I have a call. I have a work call. Yeah. When you're studying color, to spend some time until you get the same exact color. No, honestly, if it's good enough and if it looks good enough from far away. So I always zoom out and see how it looks next to each other. And if the thumbnail is right, and if there's, again, the simple statement has to be there. If your orange is like 1.5% off and it's not the same, that's fine. Because the thing is, the most valuable thing in a study is not to copy exactly, it's to learn. And what are you learning? You're learning color relationships between each other. You're learning color temperatures. You're learning lighting setups. You're learning composition. So if you learned something, and if it looks close enough, that's fine. We're not trying to practice to be printers. We're not printers. We're trying to explain. Like, studying is explaining things to your brain, and then developing, those positive, feedback loops when you block in color, and then, because what you're doing, you're practicing without brainstorming too much. You don't have to come up with an idea. You're just going in there and you're copying the steps of another artist and downloading their good, value relationships, shapes to your muscle memory, right? And it doesn't have to be exact. It has to be your interpretation, right? Because you can go ahead. So, for example, if I was doing, the, the Prince of Egypt thing, right? Over here. Like, I have my own blues and greens that I really like, and if they're close enough, that's fine, right? And then, for example, over here, right, in this frame, I would have, because I like bounce light a lot, this thing would have been much more saturated over here, right? Because what you're doing is you're studying another artist and then having your own twist on it. Yeah, like, for example, with that one, like the top pillars, I would have just had them like, I would have had much more bounce light in them. That would be something like this, right? But again, that's my taste. All right. Thanks so much for this stream. It was really helpful. No problem. In a sense, it feels like I've been admiring who can copy the frame the best in 1 hour. This has been happening in plein air as well. I was wondering, how can I paint all of this faster? I have to change this mindset. My question might sound stupid, but who do we share our studies? What do you recommend? Sharing our studies? Honestly, the thing is, that's another thing. That's why I wanted eventually do this talk, is when you guys doing your plein air paintings or when you guys are doing film studies, your You're not competing who makes the best image. You have to compete who understands the most from the picture. You understand that? Because more you understand, even if it sucks and it looks horrible, but if you understand more than another person, in a few weeks you'll start painting better than they do, right? Because some people have a natural sense of how to paint here and there, right? But at the same time, right, they're not learning. They're just, piggyback riding on their talent, I guess. They're predisposed to good copying of images. Why they do that, they don't understand. But if you consciously can understand why the artist did the things that he did, man, you can apply this knowledge anywhere you want, right? So again, yeah, Marco, you don't have to compete who makes the best copy. You have to compete, did you understand the most out of this image? And then you have to share and talk about those things. You'll be like, you know what? It's very interesting what I saw in this thing, for example, right? And you're like, okay, cool. What about this, guys? What do you find in this? And then you can share it with each other. It's not about who makes the prettiest thing. It's about who noticed the most Easter eggs and can decode, reverse engineer, the artistic decisions or visual steps of another artist and learn from them and then incorporate that into your own pipeline. And that is the most valuable skill right now, because with the rise of AI and everything else, people start creating images and not understanding why they look good or why they don't look good. And I think, I gotta tell you guys, in a few years, when a bunch of people will forget how to paint, people who can actually understand how everything works can paint themselves, plus will use AI to incorporate it into their pipeline. Those are going to be golden, right? So what you're going through right now, don't worry about AI, about nothing. Just go and study, understand everything with your head. Because when you do that, it's like with 3D, right? If you know how to 3D, but you can't do perspective by hand, do perspective by hand first and then use 3D to make your life easier. Same thing with AI. So what you're doing right now with studying, this is really, really great. And honestly, I think not a whole lot of people know what you guys know right now. Some people do, right? But if you study this way, you're going to be next level. All right, next question. Johan, do we need to think or take decisions from fundamental mindset, or it could be an intuition that this kind of light as a rim, light will look more good or something like similar things while painting, but maybe that color doesn't make sense, but in the whole frame will look good and speak out well? Well, sometimes there's, I'm going to say this, you'll have all the information in the frame that you're studying, so there's not a whole room for interpretation. But if you feel sometimes that something is missing, you can add it on. There's something, there's such thing as intuition, and then you want to add something here or there. Don't just blindly add it. Think about why you want to add it and try to justify it, right? Try to think of the fundamentals, right? Which is do I want to add a bright blob over here because it will bring more attention, right, of the viewer to it? Do I want to have more saturation here or dark? Is it because again, the main question is always this: we are magicians manipulating people's eyes to look in a certain direction, right? And everything else, composition, shapes, silhouettes, values, are there to do that. That's it, right? So if you do something subconsciously, it's usually because your body saw something a long time ago, or your eyes, and then wants to replicate in this image and wants to put that brushstrokes there because it looks better, because the composition looks better and the eye looks in the right direction. So yeah, always double question yourself. How do you avoid getting tunnel vision in the smaller details when doing studies? I feel like I tend to struggle with that and go to hyperfocus on one single detail and accidentally ignore some other parts. I'm going to say this: zoom out, work like this. Because the thing is, you're trying to get overall picture of everything. Work in a small thumbnail. We're not if you're going to be studying textures, then sure, you can zoom in. But the thing is, when we are studying a composition, it's all macro things. It's not macro, right? You have to look at from far away, right? It's composition is macro, shapes and silhouettes and values are macro, and then maybe textures and render, that's micro. You're zooming in, right? So unless you want to study how brush strokes and everything else, then zoom in. But I gotta say this: if you cannot see the border of your image, or two sides of the border are covered by something, you are zoomed in too much. Like, I paint my regular paintings at like here, maybe even here, right? So force yourself to do big brush strokes, big decisions by having your thumbnail really, really far away. Because again, those images look as good far away as they are up close. And the reason why they look good up close is because they look good far away. All right? Right, it's bad to make extremely dark black keyframes, like in your references. What was the problem with those? It's not bad. It's just like you wouldn't think of, you wouldn't think of these as illustrations, right? From far away, they don't read very well, in my opinion. Are those good lighting things for cinema? Absolutely. Should you make images like this? Well, if you have like a storyboard that has a bunch of images, then sure. It's just again, it's a cinema. It's a language of this series, right? It's not either bad or good. It is what it is. Do they look good? Yes. Do I like dark images? Yes, they are very dramatic. Would I increase the keyframe light over here much more? Maybe, right? But if it still looks good, it's worth studying, all right? And then you can, you can make them the way that you want, all right? But the show itself looks very good. And I think maybe my player, when I pressed pause on those keyframes, sometimes it darkened things, so maybe they're actually not this dark. Maybe they're maybe slightly like something like this. This already looks better. All right, so maybe they actually look like this. Again, different monitors are different, right? That helps a lot, actually. I do tend to zoom in a lot. Thank you, Misha. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, about macro things, I recently saw Tyler Edlin's art checklist. I will send it in here and out there that too. And he basically said that until the image is looking okay far away, it's not time to add extras. Yep. Tyler Edlin is a good teacher, so I heard really good things about him. So I think he knows what he's talking about. What's the main difference between the composition of frames in the cartoon and the film? Composition-wise, well, there's no difference, honestly. They all look very, very good. There's only subject matters that are different, right? And I don't have big establishing shots for this universe, right? Yeah, it's just Prince of Egypt subject matter is very grand, very over the top in terms of like it's epic, right? Star Wars is more of like first of all, Prince of Egypt is a feature film, and Bad Batch is a series, and people there's less budget for each episode in the series. Right, there's more budget overall, but they have to stretch it thin. So, for example, in Prince of Egypt, every other shot is a money shot that they make look good because it's basically a theater play, 1 hour and a half of experience, right? Star Wars Bad Batch, yes, they have a bunch of good compositions, right? But those are just like trees, as you can see over here, going into the distance. It's not like super metaphorical when in Prince of Egypt the guy stands in front of his own statue and that type of a deal. It's just different projects. You can't really compare them. They're similar, but they're different in different ways. Right, I have time for 2 more questions, I think, because yeah. Boom. People are writing. Yeah, this was fun. I miss lecturing to you guys. Hope it was useful. I know we didn't cover everything, But you know what? It was short and sweet. What? 1 hour exactly. Not 2 or 3 as I usually do. All right. Regarding to the work with clients, it's cool to work with big shapes without zooming in the canvas, but how often does this client accept things kind of work without polishing or only for color scripts? Well, turning in work that is, you know, well, I wouldn't turn in anything like this, but you know what? If I was working with a director that knows me and he knows that I did this in like 15 minutes, why not? If it gets the main point across. With directors and everything else, you have to expect the worst at first, and then as you get to know them, like I can send some pretty horrible stuff, not in terms of like inappropriate, but in terms of horribly drawn, crudely drawn things to, let's say, Joe or Borja, because he knows I know how to do stuff, and I'm just trying to get a point across. So when it comes to like not polishing stuff, I say this, like every director is different. So I can show you actually 2 color scripts right now. I need to make sure I don't open anything that is forbidden to open. So for example, let's say I have this color script here, and let's say I have this color script here. So for example, this one, right? As you can see here, it's like, man, the brush strokes are horrible, right? But at the same time, I had like super little time, but it's still pretty readable in terms of what's going on there. Like I'm gonna show you this one. This one is pretty roughly drawn, right? It's a color key, right? But I had like super little time for this job, right? And then I have the same one here where, you know, the frames are, I don't say they're super polished, but they're pretty dang polished for my taste, right? It's because 2 different directors, but with this one, I worked for like 3 or 4 weeks plus extra little things, right? And this one was done like in 4 or 5 days, right? So it's two different directing styles, 2 different directors, right? This one is like, you know what, we're gonna spend more time on this and more money on you because blah blah blah, and I want more quality in terms of the frames. Yeah, again, this is a lot of frames, and some of them were pretty detailed. They were almost keyframes. A lot of them were actually, especially with this one. Like this one is pretty polished, right? For a color key. Right, and then same artist, which is me, you know, turns out something like this, or turns out something like this. Again, it all depends on, yeah, 16 frames in 5 days. Yep. And this one was like 30 or 20 something. Yeah, this one was 16 in 5 days. Yeah. That's why I am putting you through my boot camp, right, of challenges, everything else. If you guys attend my lectures and do the challenges that I tell you, you'll be pretty well prepared for the industry. But I think that's it for today. I probably will upload this to YouTube, so you guys can have it. Yeah, I hope this was helpful, and yeah, I have to get you a checklist. I'll do a little checklist. If someone wants to help, feel free. But yeah, that's it. For people who are listening to this on YouTube, we do this pretty often on our Discord channel. People ask me to record or ask some questions about this and that, and I record a little lecture live. And you can't see them right now, but they're typing in a Discord chat, and I am reading on another monitor. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, feel free to drop a question and yeah, join our awesome community if you want to attend things like this live. And yeah, that's it. See you, everybody. Bye.